Well, welcome back to the Anti-War Room. I'm Tom Andrews with Win Without War, and with me once again, John Isaacs, Counsel for Livable World. And John, thanks for soloing this along with Darcy the last couple of weeks. I've been traveling, and I appreciate you standing in and doing this. I've been in New Hampshire, as a matter of fact. We were traveling around the state with General Robert Gard and General John Johns, meeting with editorial boards, holding town meetings on Iraq, and meeting literally with hundreds of New Hampshire voters. And we did a poll in which 65% of New Hampshire voters oppose the president's stay-the-course approach and want their senators to vote for a date certain for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq within 12 months.
And the hope, I assume, is that these constituents in New Hampshire make their views known to the presidential candidates who seem to be frequenting New Hampshire.
It turns out there are quite a few presidential candidates, as a matter of fact, in New Hampshire, and yeah, they're talking about that as well. Also, we asked them the question, do you think that we should be leaving, once we pull out the troops from Iraq, should we be leaving residual training troops embedded in Iraqi units? And a majority of New Hampshire voters believe that was a very bad idea, that we should not, and most of them feeling very strongly, we should not be leaving U.S. troops in these Iraqi units. But anyway, back here in our nation's capital, very steamy. It's gotten quite hot here, John, since I've been out. I guess probably all that hot air from the capital, maybe?
It's getting hotter for the president. Some of his Republican supporters, people who supported the war in Iraq for 5 years, are starting to back away. Most significantly, Indiana Senator Richard Lugar, Republican, former chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, said a couple days ago in a Senate floor speech he basically had it with the war. It's time to start finding a new way forward, which means getting out of Iraq. He's a significant senator in saying this, and he was supported the last day or so by other Republicans, including Ohio Republican George Voinovich. There are a lot of us who felt that the war would stop once and for all when the Republican Party turned away from the president, turned away from the war, and I think that's going to be happening. Now, I don't expect in upcoming votes in July that Lugar and Voinovich will vote against the war, but I think come September, that's when we should look for a real turning away from the war in terms of votes.
Okay, so we're looking now at cracks in the armor of the Bush administration, defense of their policy. And Richard Lugar, of course, significant. He, for many years, chaired the Foreign Relations Committee. He's now the ranking Republican on that committee. Very, very highly respected member of the Republican Party and the international relations community. George Voinovich of Ohio, as you say. And Voinovich, of course, has come out demanding that there be some kind of an exit plan, that the president and the administration put together a way for the safe redeployment of troops. There's a novel idea. And John Warner, interestingly enough, he made a statement praising the statement that was made by Richard Lugar, saying it was a very, very important statement. And even Mitch McConnell, who is the floor leader for the Republicans, he came out in a statement saying that clearly in September we're going to have to be going in a very different direction. So whether it be the minority leader of the Senate, all the way to John Warner again on the Defense Committee, very, very important member of the Republican Party when it comes to these matters, all seeming now to back away, and that crack in the armor is deepening. So let's talk, John, about what specifically is going to happen now stepwise. We have the authorization bill, the defense authorization bill in the Senate, is going to be appearing on the Senate floor after the 4th of July break. So between now and when they break in July, there'll be no significant Iraq-related votes or developments. But they go home for the 4th of July holiday. You'll be seeing members of the House and Senate and these 4th of July parades and so forth. Then they come back and they're going to have to vote on the Senate authorization bill for defense. Will we see opportunities to vote for a change of policy when that happens?
Yes, when the defense authorization bill comes up in the Senate, there are likely to be 2, 3, 4, maybe half dozen or more votes on Iraq. Most significantly, Senator Russ Feingold of Wisconsin, along with Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, the Democratic leader, will be offering an amendment to have a strict timetable to get all troops out of Iraq, I think, or most troops out of Iraq, by April of 2008. I expect Senator Levin and Senator Reid, Senator Levin of Michigan, Senator Reid of Rhode Island, to offer another amendment to set a timetable, another timetable. That amendment that they offered earlier passed by about 51 to 47 in the Senate, and I think has a good chance of passing. But there are likely to be other votes. Senator Biden is pushing his idea. Senator Biden of Delaware pushing his idea of a partition of Iraq. That's likely to be voted on. Colorado Senator Salazar and some other senators have a bill endorsing the Iraq Study Group recommendations to change policy in Iraq. That could be pushed to a vote. So we're likely to have a whole bunch of tests by around, I would say, mid-July in the Senate.
Mid-July. So between now and then, this is the time to really be talking to members of Congress and particularly the Senate. And one of the interesting things that I'm seeing, John, is that in several of these instances, in fact, when Senator Lugar made his statement, he included in that statement that we need to keep training troops in Iraq. The Iraq Study Group made that recommendation specifically. I understand, because of the House action, that we may see a reconstitution of the Iraq Study Group. They passed a resolution calling for the reconstitution of the Iraq Study Group, and now that's under consideration. There are at least 2 other reports that will be issued in September when General Petraeus makes his assessment of progress or lack thereof in Iraq. One is this commission of retired generals that was established, 14 retired generals that are now in the process of looking at the progress or lack thereof. And the Congress established another process with the Government Accountability Office, and they too will be issuing a report in September. But let me ask you this, in terms of this issue of training troops, leaving training troops on the ground. We've heard that there could be literally tens of thousands of troops that would be left on the ground, A, embedded in Iraqi units in the middle of a civil war, and B, concerned that, listen, if we're in the middle of a civil war, why are we training units who are then using that training, and in some cases, using it against our own forces in Iraq, if not other forces, Sunni or Shia forces in the civil war? Does it make sense to continue to have a role in Iraq even when combat forces are removed by keeping training forces in Iraq?
Well, in point of fact, most of the measures that Congress has been voting on in Iraq would get most U.S. troops out, but leave some troops in, 1 for the training of Iraqi soldiers, you point out, 2 for the protection of the embassy and diplomatic status there, and 3 to confront al-Qaeda and terrorists. Some people are very worried about that. That could leave a long-term presence in Iraq of, as you say, 10, 20, 30, 40,000 troops. I'm less worried about it. My belief is once the U.S. troops start coming out of Iraq, they'll all come out, as happened in Vietnam several decades ago. There's not going to be any appetite, as you say, in the New Hampshire poll, but I think broadly in the United States, there's not going to be any appetite for keeping tens of thousands of troops there in a losing war situation, civil war still going on, a clear disaster. It's only a reminder of how bad things have been. So you're correct, there are proposals to keep some numbers of U.S. troops there indefinitely, as long as the South Korean occupation, for example, but I don't think it's likely to happen.
Well, John's a little bit more optimistic on this than I am. I certainly hope you're right, but my recommendation to all of us is to bring this up and to keep pushing this envelope, raising this question, and perhaps there will be no appetite, but just in case there is, perhaps this is the time to begin, when we talk to members of Congress and the Senate, is to raise this question and raise the concern we should not be leaving training troops in the ground. I know General Guard, General Johns, traveling with them in New Hampshire, very concerned about leaving these particularly these young people. Most of them would be young people embedded in these Iraqi units with big bullseyes on their back.
I agree with but I think that's an important message to deliver with the 4th of July when the members of Congress will be home. I think the other message, especially with the Republicans who are beginning to verbally break from the war, that it's time to follow verbal statements with action, including voting to get the U.S. troops out of Iraq. Senator Voinovich, Senator Lugar, Senator Warner have gone part way, but part way is not enough.
I think that's exactly right. And if you look at statements by Senator Collins of Maine, Senator Sununu of New Hampshire, and so forth, you have these hand-wringing and concerns and questions about the war. But when push comes to shove, Norm Coleman in Minnesota, another good example, push comes to shove, they have consistently voted with the president, and now we need to see those words translated into action. And the first manifestation of that will be right after the 4th of July break. Well, John, thank you. This is very useful and important. I hope you have a little bit of a chance to rest over the 4th of July weekend. Nice tie, by the way. Is this an endorsement of nuclear power, or is that just kind of a funky design here?
It's a focus on nuclear issues, and that we want to get rid of nuclear.
Get rid of nuclear issues, right? Just so that we're clear about this.
That's right.
You're not endorsing the nuclear power.
There should be a line through, yes. But we didn't get
it. Okay. Thanks very much for joining us in the Anti-War Room. John Isaacs, Counsel for Livable World. Tom Andrews, Win Without War. We'll see you back next week. Thanks so much.